Hello, this is Daedalus with Nerds and Stuff, and today I'll be showing you how to take this boring old base and turn it into this. Let's get started. Since we're building a city rubble base, we're just going to need to start with some cork. So I'm just going to take and glue some on top real quick, and then we'll be breaking it off, and this is kind of going to go for like the base concrete that we're going to do. Since I'm doing these in kind of a big old urban kind of rubble style, which is exciting because normally I don't get to, where they're all going to kind of have the same concrete base. Whether it ends up being concrete or asphalt, that's going to just depend on, kind of where the model is. So now I'm just testing a fit with a model, and we're just going to have a piece of broken wall. So I'm just taking some wire and pushing it through the cork so that it will be able to help anchor it in place and you don't have to rely on just glue. And this wire is also going to double as just kind of like broken rebar coming out of a cement wall. So I'm going to do 2 points that are actually going all the way through, which will help hold this wall in place. And just going to apply some glue now. So I want this to look like kind of an edge of a building almost. Maybe this building caught an RPG or something and got blown to pieces, or, God knows what happened to it. So now I'm just adding another little piece of broken rebar so it looks like it's just reinforced all the way through that broke out. And that's going to pretty much do it for our base structure. Now I'm just taking a little piece of wood debris, cut down a popsicle stick, and just adding more debris in. Little piece here, little piece there, kind of helping to build up more of just a rubble type look. As I said before, we're going to be doing a whole number of these that are these urban rubble bases. And because of the games I typically play, I don't get the chance to build these kinds of bases. Most of what I do is fantasy based, and you don't really have the same kind of urban rubble in a fantasy setting that you do in a futuristic one. So we're just adding more broken wood, and now I've taken some really, really light gauge wire and just kind of coiled it to look like more debris just randomly strewn across, just securing it now in place with some super glue. And this is going to be like a cable almost, like it just kind of fell out of the rafters or something like that. I thought about making it razor wire, but the cable I've got is just too thick for that. So I need to widen this popsicle stick a little bit so that the model's got a kind of a square place to put his foot on. Because you wouldn't put half of your foot on a piece of wood like that. It just wouldn't look natural. So now we're going to take and add just some more rubble to it, make it look a little more kind of grungy and really beat to hell. Because this is... little spoiler, some of the future things I'll be painting are going to be some 40k models, so kind of need that 40k desolate type lore to really sell the models, as it were. So just did that coarse grain sand and then the ultra fine sand and just testing the model fit. And between those two, it kind of just makes for nice just miscellaneous stuff. So now I'm just taking some gesso I mixed up, a little bit of black paint to kind of take it off of bright white, and just hitting everything. It was a really rainy day when I did this, so I didn't want to go outside and prime and risk kind of humidity interfering. So we'll just use the brush on stuff. It works really well too, especially for bases where you don't have to worry about brushstroke textures showing up. I'm still playing with it on models to get used to how to use it without having primer brushstrokes, but for bases it's great. If anything, that texture that would show up from a brushstroke just helps add some more flavor to it, make it look dirtier and grungier. So I'm just being really thorough, making sure I can get all of this gesso in place, and especially with cork, it's kind of deceptive sometimes. Stuff will fold over and you'll end up missing spots when you prime. It's just working with cork. So I end up using a lot more of the gesso than I would like a brush-on primer or spray-on primer, because I'm going really in-depth trying to make sure I get all those random bits of, especially on those torn edges, making sure they're all primed so that I don't have just wood color sticking through, because that gets pretty distracting. And it just really stands out, super obvious, so just making sure we get that all covered. And now we're going to come through, and since we're painting this concrete, I've got a real kind of lighter gray. This is just a mix of ghost gray and gray liner. Gray liners are really black paint, it's near black. In fact, I end up painting stuff later on in this video with gray liner thinking it is black, so when we get there I'll point it out again, but it's so close to black, it's really easy to get them mixed up. So this is just going to be my kind of undercoat on the concrete. I'm going to do a couple of dry brush strokes with lighter grays to kind of help break up the uniform texture. But just like before, we're coming through, and this is a really important coat to get over everything evenly, because if not, you'll just have bright white shining through this. I guess it wasn't a true white in the gesso, but it'll still be really bright compared to the rest of the concrete color. It's kind of looking a little brighter than I would like for concrete, but I mean, concrete comes in so many different flavors. You know, you can have concrete that's mostly the kind of darker stone that's ground up, and so you end up with darker colors, or it's really white. You know, also it kind of, with concrete, at least that I see in my area, where I live, is that when it's brand new, it's super bright white, and then as it ages, it gets grayer. You know, it makes sense, it gets weathered, dust gets kind of warped into it, and so it just gets dirty. So there's not really a bad way to do concrete. Just kind of depends on what you want to do yourself. Throughout the assortment of bases I'm going to do that are going to have these concretes, I imagine my concrete colors are all going to look different. So now we've finished the dark gray and coming through with a lighter gray. This is just adding a bit more ghost gray into the previous one to just brighten it up a little bit. And I'm just roughly dry brushing, catching the edges so they look bright where it would be worn down, and kind of doing a loose kind of mash brush over the flatter places so that you can see those brush lines as additional texture. And this will just really help to break up the monotony of just a continuous gray color. You know, you don't have to do it clean, you don't have to make it pretty. This is just to help the eyes not pick out something that doesn't look too unnatural. You know, if it all looks uniform, it doesn't sit right with you. So now this is a much brighter gray. This is just cutting in more ghost gray. Ghost gray is a very, very white gray, and a little bit goes a long way when you're mixing it, because it's really high in pigment. So, just like before, I'm just picking out edges on the concrete where it may have chipped out and is a bit brighter, exposing some of the younger concrete underneath. And that's pretty much going to do it for the concrete. We'll be coming back to wash it all down later. But now we're going to start on these wood pieces, this random wood debris. And this is just coming through with the shield brown like I normally do. I just really like that color for wood. It's a good color. Just being real careful not to get too much on the concrete, because it is going to be kind of a mess. It's, you know, war in the 40,000th century, or whatever they call it. I guess 40,000 millennium. Yeah, 40k. So, you know, things aren't very clean. Humanity's been around for a long time. Lots of war, lots of destruction. So, still just building up that base color. I'm not too worried about getting it uniform, because once again, nature isn't uniform. You know, you ever go, we'll say like split a log, and you look on the inside, you can see the horizontal rings. It's not uniform. And so if you don't need uniform colors and can afford to have some flex like that, it really helps to sell it. Sell it as a kind of a natural piece, real cut wood, not like a synthetic polymer type thing. So now I'm taking and I've mixed in some Driftwood brown to brighten up my shield brown, and I'm just kind of streaking it across, picking out edges, almost like a dry brush, but not quite as thorough because the wood grain on the popsicle stick isn't pronounced enough to really get pulled out in a dry brush. So effectively what I'm trying to do is put fake wood grain on it. And so now I'm coming through with even more Driftwood brown, kind of just cutting in more and more to do additional highlight layers so that it stands out a little bit better. Not that this is going to be a very well pronounced area because this wood is going right between his legs, but it's those little things, you know, you put in the effort, they end up looking good in the end. So now we've got this this sand, gravel, murk garbage I kind of put all over the base. I wasn't really sure what color to go with this, so I ended up just mixing some stuff on my palette, which was some ghost gray and some of the browns, and I just kind of came up with this weird sandy color. And decided that once that got a wash on it, it might look pretty good. Fairly convincing as just miscellaneous debris. So I'm just hitting those areas where the debris might have collected, where I've put the coarse and fine sand, and just some other areas for flavor. It's really kind of an ugly color that I mixed. It's not very pretty. But now I've cut in a little more ghost gray so it stands up. And I'm just doing effectively a small brush, dry brush. just to pick out those top raised edges so it looks like there's depth to it, kind of a two-tone type deal. Nothing too fancy, just want to add a little more depth. And then I came through with a little bit more ghost gray on and just did the same thing. Fewer places, picking out only the more pronounced stuff. And now just taking some that was left on the brush and streaking it across the concrete. This is just, once again, fighting to help the concrete look grimy. By having this extra color in, it helps to break up the continuous gray and help allude to the kind of the mess that is battlefield debris. So now we're going to come through with that gray liner and just pick out this cable. Like I said before, I don't really know what it is. I kind of thought about coming in with it as like razor wire, but once I got it coiled up, I realized it just kind of looked like a cable that had fell out of a ceiling or something. You know, if you've ever thrown cable, it kind of retains some of the shape of the spool it was in. So I was kind of going for that, just getting it with this gray liner, which at the time I thought was black. So I don't actually end up highlighting this because I just wanted it to be a really pronounced black cable. Just kind of a style choice, I guess. Being really careful not to get any of this gray liner on the rest of the model, the rest of the base for the model, because it will stand out so bad. It's so dark in contrast to the rest. And I put all of those coils in it, so I've got to be getting up in there with the brush, making sure I don't miss anything or drag it where it shouldn't belong. It actually is kind of advantageous that I use the gray liner. Usually when I'm painting hoses or like a rubber or something, I'll hit it with gray liner and then maybe a gray liner highlight, you know, a little bit of white or gray mixed in, and then I'll follow it up with just a Nuln oil wash. And that ends up using a really quick, dirty, and easy kind of layered black approach for stuff like that. So I also did the rebar or rods or whatever with black, or the gray liner, thinking it was black, so that I can get that good quality metallic that I like. And just picking out the top edges with some silver. I did the rest in the chainmail silver, but this is true silver. And then I'm coming through with some Typhus Corrosion, which is one of the Citadel technical paints. It's part of a two-part series that kind of makes for Citadel's recommended way to paint rust. I was just kind of hoping for, like, you know how rust kind of looks? Or like a wall like this when rain hits it and it starts to rust. That's what I was going for. So it's kind of the red undertone of rust, as opposed to the Rise of Rust, which is the second part of that kit, adds in kind of the red highlights that's the fresh rust. This just almost looks like dried blood, actually, which is fun in its own right. Maybe somebody fell on this. OSHA wouldn't approve of having exposed rebar like that. If you notice, when I was applying it on the rebar exposed parts, I was just kind of mashing it on like I am now. This way it will appear in some places and then be like streaked off in others, and it should look a lot more realistic. And now I'm coming through with the Nuln oil and hitting everything. And this is just going to muddy things up. It'll give depth and shadow and just kind of make it look even more dirty. And fortunately, because this is cork, it should have its own texture that stands out well when it's washed, so it's going to look really good. Just really messy and grungy, and just what I was after with the Rubble base. And if you notice, I'm kind of streaking it along on the flat surface there on the back of the wall. I really want to kind of make it look grimy. When you just paint it on a flat surface like that and let it dry on its own, it can kind of get a little uniform. I'm sorry I'm doing this off camera. I just get so excited with my washing. And so by breaking it up like that and pulling it off, you help to streak it. And then it looks more like kind of grime that's been slowly washed away. So now I've got to add a little bit of a touch here. I've got this great canvas to work with. A big old piece of flat surface that doesn't have anything on it. So I'm just going to do a touch of freehand and maybe a little bit of a teaser of some things to come. And when doing freehand, I wish I had some good advice. I'm still, when it comes to freehand, a serious novice. I don't have a whole lot of sketching ability myself. Usually the models aren't bad because that's just like 3D coloring, but when you get to this kind of creative, draw your own, coloring without lines, if you will, I seem to struggle. So if you have any good recommendations on learning to freehand, I leave them below. I could really use them. This ended up coming out alright, but not as good as it could have been, and I got a lot of practice coming though. So I'm going to be able to get better with this particular symbol in and of itself. I thought this would be a nice little flare as kind of a tag, if you will, on this back of the wall. Something that kind of just signifies that they've been there. Kind of like in World War II, how the soldiers would leave marks behind on areas after they cleared them. You know, one of the most famous marks was Kilroy, the little guy in his metal dome hat and nose poking over a wall. He was one of those signals that let Allied soldiers know that Allies had been there. It's kind of an interesting thing. Definitely look it up. Old Kilroy is one of those oddities of war that just kind of appeared. Now, I am just freehanding this off of a picture I've got pulled up on my computer. I probably could have just used a transfer decal, but since I don't actually have any transfers, I don't really have that choice. The set I got didn't come with transfers because all of the, we'll say, adaptations that make it unique for the series of models, they already have these sculpted in. They're not like upgrade kits. They were just completely new line sculpts, so I didn't have to bother with transfers, but that also means that I have to paint these. So I don't want to leave that bright white, so I'm just coming up with Nuln oil and just putting a little more down. Super easy, super simple. And now we just got to get the base underneath. Like I've said before in my basing videos, I like to give these a black finish to them because then they look more like a display plinth to me. You got to keep these on the models too if you ever want to play because, you know, regulations dictate that they're a certain size, and most of my bases end up overhanging anyway because I like to make them fancy and not restrict them to that size. So once again, I thought I was working with black here, but it's actually the gray liner. So after the video's over, I do come and finish that up with a true black, once I realized what I was working with. And that's pretty much going to do it for our base. If you like what you saw, please subscribe to our channel so that you can be notified when additional content comes out. Otherwise, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. If you have any ideas for future basing tutorials, just let me know. And as always, until next time, happy painting.